Sony to give up E3?
Say it ain't so.
The PlayStation 5 might be delayed?
Double gasp!
What will Sony do now?
Take...
It isn't a rumor, folks. Sony is officially giving up E3 for the very first time in 24 years.
Okay, so they're not doing the stage show, but they're still doing the booths and the...
No!
Huh.
They're not doing anything.
Nothing.
They are not showing up to this event.
What does the world come to?
It's crazy. Folks, if you don't know why this is such a big deal, you clearly don't know the history of the Sony PlayStation brand. You see, back when Sony wasn't really involved in the video game industry, the very first time that they showed off their system was on the stage of E3.
And this was when E3 was so important. Okay, so you're setting the stage for a huge historical event.
Yes.
The Sega Saturn was shown off at E3, and they said, okay, our price point is going to be $399, and it will be on store shelves today, immediately.
Yes.
Following that event, Sony had their event, and the CEO of the company went up, and he shared just a few words.
Yes.
Yeah, $299.
And he completely undercut Sega and destroyed the company from having any impact on that generation.
That's why E3 used to be a battleground. It was huge, right? This is the event where all the big guys come, they show up, they show their hardware, and they duke it out.
Yes.
You know, even to this day, we were seeing stuff like this where they're playing around, right?
Look, folks. If you don't understand why E3 is such a big deal, know that what has happened currently with the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One was completely defined by one single event, which was, hey, Xbox One games you can't share with people, and on PlayStation 4, when Sony was giving their presentation behind the scenes before they went on stage, they just did a simple thing. Do you want to play a game?
Yes. Thank you.
And that was it. They set the stage for what the PlayStation was going to be about, and it was one of the defining factors that put Sony where they are now at the PlayStation 4, being the best-selling system of this current generation.
But what's going to happen now, right?
Well,
now Sony has said, okay, no, not only are we not doing our main show, not only are we not going to have booths and other things set up at E3, we're not even, they were asked whether or not they're going to have any sort of like online showcase or anything around the time of E3. No.
Yes. Now look, folks, there is plenty of speculation to be had here, and Adam and I have talked about this a lot before we got in front of the camera, because we think there's a couple of ideas that are just resting out there that might be the reasons why this has happened this way. So let's talk about the first one, E3 not being very relevant anymore.
So yeah, we were starting to talk about this. It seems like E3 might be disintegrating a little bit, okay? What's happening recently is that we have so many ways of getting messages out nowadays. We don't necessarily need one sort of video game Christmas anymore, because companies like Nintendo have shown that you can withdraw some of your presence from E3. You can have these digital events to showcase consoles and video games, and they do very, very well.
That's true.
The Switch, for example, it was shown off digitally. They just showed off a trailer, right? And that was in October of 2016, and the system has gone on to sell very well. And we've also seen other systems withdraw from E3 in a sense that they weren't unveiled there, okay? So the PlayStation 4 wasn't unveiled at E3, it was unveiled at a separate event. The Xbox One wasn't unveiled at E3, again, it was unveiled at a separate event. Things have been building up into a world where E3 doesn't seem as relevant or as important for some of the big news items as it used to be.
Yeah, now here's kind of a big thing too. What E3 essentially was for in the early days was that basically a company like Sony or Nintendo would show up, they'd have a really big presentation on a stage, and then they would allow an open floor event for people to play the games that they were showing off. The people that showed up to these events weren't folks like us. Well, I guess now we would probably be there because we're YouTubers, but
we're like on the cusp.
Yeah,
we're fans, and we're also people who talk about things.
What happened though it was for folks that were in retail and for companies like that, and specifically for journalists. In the old days, we didn't have the internet technologies of the modern era, so if you needed information, you needed to find it from official sources. Those would be magazines, radio presentations, and basically television. So what was going on back then was, okay, here's the games. Here's what we have for this season. If you're a retailer and you want to see these games in person and have more of a confident purchase, that you're going to be buying something that people are actually going to want to get, that's where they would show things off. You would also see things like marketing materials materials. In fact, to this day on E3, we still see commercials on stage, right? Those commercials are basically promissory notes of the marketing power that the company themselves would be putting into their products to help move things off store shelves. But now we're getting to the point where many of these companies don't have that same kind of influence with these retailers because brick and mortar retailers are not the same as they used to be. We're seeing a lot of digital sales and primarily, like Adam said, digital direct videos created specifically by a company that is aimed directly at the consumer is basically having such a huge impact. Specifically with the Nintendo Switch, where they revealed that entire system on a video that they pre-recorded and not on stage.
Yeah, so we'd also heard about other companies sort of withdrawing as well, like EA, for example. So yeah, it really does seem like the industry as a whole seems to be moving on, right? Things are going digital. We're seeing, like, you know, physical content. Literally buying discs and stuff is becoming a thing of the past, and so are physical press conferences and things like that.
That's true.
Everything can be done digitally. Why spend the extra money, right? Why to remove money from your war chest to put on a hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of dollars presentation when you can just save that dough and then do something more simplified, less weird.
Yeah.
We've seen, I mean, these conferences are known for the memes and the oddities that sort of come out of them. You may have remembered, like, some of the Wii Music stuff.
Yeah.
My body is ready. I mean, there's always, what was that, the guy from Namco? The Ridge Racer guy? I mean, there's always...
Ridge Racer! There are things that have been happening for years.
I'm gonna miss that.
It's true.
You know?
Look, another thing that E3 really was for developers and for creators to meet each other and have conversation about stuff. Sometimes business dealings would happen in the back rooms where Sony would be like, okay, you're going to be at this event. We want to meet with you and talk to you. But you know what replaced E3? GDC, the Game Developers Conference. And now that's the place for developers to have their conference and meet with each other. And GDC is still primarily focused more on the behind the scenes stuff rather than the consumer side, where E3 has rapidly approached the consumer focus.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we didn't actually say it yet, but E3 has just recently, in the past few years, opened its doors to fans. Right?
Yes.
You could buy tickets and go there, where it was, like Shane had said, like a more press-driven event. Right? So the disintegration or the lack maybe of relevance might be an issue here, why Sony has kind of pulled back. But you had begun discussing some other things, or you had some other thoughts on why PlayStation could be withdrawing from E3 that's not necessarily based on the E3 conference itself, right?
I think it would be crazy to say that E3 at this current moment still doesn't have the impact, because the E3 event is a whole bunch of people gathering around at the exact same event with all the press, everybody in the same area, and it has a huge impact in terms of noise that it makes and a lot of people paying attention. So I still believe E3 has a purpose. However, in this one instance, I personally believe that Sony might not have enough stuff to show off, and they also might want to be kind of holding their cards closer to their chest, because there's probably a bigger reason for all this to be playing out.
Yeah.
Now, I think that Sony is going to return to E3, maybe at some point in the future. Maybe. But why wouldn't they come to this one? Well, I think there's a reason. The PlayStation 5 is doing...
the PlayStation 4.
Sorry, well, the PlayStation 5 is trying to go in this direction that we believe is going to be a much more powerful console, okay? The PlayStation 4, as it exists right now, is still doing amazing.
Yes.
Okay, look, right now the PlayStation 4 is on the same trajectory as the PlayStation 2. Now, Adam, how popular was the PlayStation 2?
I believe it is one of the best-selling consoles of all time.
Dang right, it is. See, the PlayStation 2 is so amazing because the PlayStation 2 was doing so well, and then Sony was like, all right, PlayStation 3, and then they hit a wall, and it didn't replicate the same success. The PlayStation 4 is now a far more popular system than I think Sony ever considered it having to be, so we're seeing huge success in that field.
Yes.
If Sony were to make an announcement at this upcoming E3 that, hey, here's the PlayStation 5, it might actually damage the PlayStation 4. So it wouldn't be a smart move for them to announce it right now, specifically at a point when they are very sure they're going to be seeing an announcement of the next Xbox system, because, as we know, Microsoft is doing very badly with the Xbox brand.
It's funny that you bring up that they would rather not mention the PlayStation 5 because it could hurt sales of the PS4. It's doing so well. And Microsoft has done the opposite, right?
Yes.
The Xbox One wasn't necessarily doing all that hot, so they decided to say, hey, that's okay, Project Scarlet, right?
Yeah.
It's just around the corner. They've already announced that.
That's true,
you know?
yeah. Now, the Xbox One, believe it or not, is you probably will believe this,
Yeah.
is selling worse than the Xbox 360 lined up lifetime, okay? So that means by this point in the Xbox 360 lifespan, they had sold millions more, and the Xbox One has now sold millions less.
Yes.
So you're actually seeing more or less a ramp down of sales rather than a ramp up, where Sony is seeing, like we said, it's ramping way higher up, far faster than the PlayStation 3 had ever gotten to. So with that in mind, we're also seeing something similar happen with the Switch, where the Switch isn't growing, but it's not shrinking, it's just kind of like flatlining almost a little bit, where it's still selling systems, it's just not being this massive success that matches the PlayStation 4 at this current point. It will eventually keep doing well, okay? We're just seeing a software slump on that side.
Yep.
But what we're basically kind of alluding to here, what my thoughts are on this, is that there might be an upgrade for hardware from the Nintendo Switch at some point. We're definitely going to see a brand new Xbox One or Xbox 2 announced, and when that happens, would Sony really want to put out a system around the same time as their competitors? Wouldn't it make a lot more sense to be like, okay, Microsoft, show us what you got, Nintendo, show us what you got, and now here's the PlayStation 5 a year after that.
Right. Yeah, it's them kind of playing a defensive game where it's like, oh, okay, it's like playing chess and letting the other person go first for a few turns. And,
Sure.
And you can kind of see what their strategy is and then attack, right? So they're in a great position to do that. I mean, like we said, the PlayStation 4, at this point, it's doing so well. It had so many great titles released, specifically in the last 2 years or so, like enormous titles like Spider-Man, and of course, Red Dead came out as well. That like they can let it coast along, you know, let sales continue, and then just attack when they're ready.
Sure.
Right.
The PlayStation 4 doesn't have to have first-party games to keep selling right now. All they need to do is just sit back and go, okay, here's some third-party games coming out, and here's some other games we already had development announced a while ago.
You know what I'm thinking? And they can even sort of rest on their laurels a bit with what they've announced at this year's E3. Hey, we announced and showed off, well, they didn't announce it, but they showed off The Last of Us 2, Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice, right? And a couple of other great titles as well. We know that those games are coming. It's strange that they're not going to be on the show floor, because...
Yeah.
I mean,
but
we know that those games are coming, and the platform's already selling so well. All they have to do is digitally, like, continue showcasing those titles. And, I mean, everyone's on the net.
Yeah.
People are going to buy PS4s still.
People are still interested in these games. People still want to get them. So here's basically what I'm thinking is the big reason why Sony has basically stopped this. The next announcement Sony has to make are probably going to be about their next system.
Yeah.
I don't think they want to run into... Now, this doesn't mean we won't see an announcement at all from them in 2019. Maybe we will.
I'm starting to think that we're going to see digital events, but that's all kind of up in the air right now.
After the hot take we had where we were just like talking about how crazy it was that Microsoft spent all that money on that event and it ended up not really making announcements for anything.
Yeah. And then we said, oh, Sony's, biding their time. There was no PlayStation Experience showcase.
That's true.
And they're continuing to do that. It seems like they're...
But why would they? They keep selling consoles,
exactly. That's why I think they had a great showcase in 2018.
Yep.
They can release trailers, release gameplay footage and stuff, and then when they want to announce things, when they want to maybe dive back into E3, maybe that's after it's post PS5 announcement, post reveal,
Sony sent us a copy of Spider-Man. And that's a game you can only get on the PlayStation 4 right now, and it is amazing. It is a beautiful looking game. It's got amazing gameplay, a wonderful story. It is one of the best open world experiences I've ever played on a platform of any sort. So to know that, and to think about what little cool games they have in their war chest for the future is just kind of mind-boggling, because when I think of what the PlayStation 5 is going to be, if they delay by a year or even two, and just let the PlayStation 4 4 continue to sell, by the time they release a PlayStation 5, they could have an amazing collection of first-party games ready to go on day one.
Yeah, very good. That's exactly what we were kind of thinking, right? Part of them biding their time is them building up their library so that when they do launch the PS5, we're not getting, like, sometimes we get 1 or 2 good games and then what feels like third-party kind of shovelware that, well, maybe shovelware is not the right word, but it's just stuff that kind of shows off the graphical power, but not necessarily any innovation or super-duper fun gameplay. If they take a step back, work to develop like really fantastic third-party games and first-party games that can only be played on the PS5, coming out of the gate, man, that would crush competition pretty quickly.
I would think so. Here's what I believe is going to happen with the PlayStation 5, and why I personally think that Sony's holding this off simply because for these specific reasons. One, the PlayStation 4 Pro already exists. They already have their 1-up, and their 1-up is doing well enough. The Xbox One X exists, and they can see that there's no reason to really have a point system really right now. It doesn't really drive a lot of people to it. Games run better on it, but it's not like they're running super better. It's just a little bit better. Now, with that in mind, here's what's probably going to happen with the PlayStation 5. The moment the PlayStation 5 comes out, you're looking at about a year or two down the line, a lot more people are going to own 4K televisions. Maybe a couple people are going to own OLED TVs because OLED TVs are going to go down in price. Once that happens, Sony is basically going to present an idea that, okay, when you buy the PlayStation 5, your entire back catalog of PlayStation 4 games aren't going to run in checkerboarded 4K resolution, which is what the Pro does.
That's right.
They're going to run in native 4K resolution. You're going to have a far better frame rate. You're going to have much better HDR support.
Yeah, you're basically kind of saying what the Xbox One X is doing right now for some of the past titles, the backwards compatibility. You think they're going to adopt that? I mean, it would be silly for them not to.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where it's going to go. I also believe that at that point in time, because Sony will have a much better processor and a better handling of things, I firmly believe we're going to see PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, and PlayStation 3 backwards compatibility, not in the way that the discs are going to work, just to be able to download the games. Microsoft has proved that with utilizing their backwards capability and catalog, that they can keep people moving forward and buying games in the future. So if Sony were to do some similar idea where they just basically sell old digital titles that cost them basically nothing to resell, they can continue raking in the profits. And I really think that this is going to be something that they focus on. They have to make their library a lot more attractive, and the way to get people to get to the next system is to basically say, all of your games that exist now work better on this platform.
Yes.
And the platform games that are being released on there are going to look crazy amazing.
Yeah, I think they're looking at Xbox as well and seeing that every time that they announce that things are backwards compatible, it makes the news, right? And people are talking about your system and about what it can do for games, and you're just taking old media and revamping it a touch, right? There's, I think, very minimal cost there. There is cost, but very minimal. Yeah.
I really think that what we're seeing is something like that, and it would make a lot of sense to me that they wouldn't show up for E3 because, look, if you're going to show up to E3, you have to have things to talk about that are going to be coming out next year. What do you do? Are you going to come out and basically say, okay, well, these games are coming out, but these are all the same games we saw previously? If they are planning on releasing the next system, they don't have the next year or two planned out for PlayStation 4, because guess what? There isn't a future for that system. It's going to be the PlayStation 5. Right. So this is the best way to handle it, even though it's crazy, even though it's scary, even though it's nuts.
Even though we're going to miss those moments, all those classic sort of E3 battle moments. We're in a different play field nowadays, and I guess we just have to kind of come to terms with that.
And you know what? Honestly, I don't think that... I really believe we're going to be seeing the next system from Xbox really soon.
Yes.
I do believe we're going to see some kind of step-up upgrade for the Switch.
That's the rumor.
That's why I don't think Sony wants to come out there and go, oh, well, here's a PlayStation 5 on the exact same night. They would wash out from like attraction and all that press they'd be getting, because it would be just spread out from everyone.
Diving back to that E3, I think it was 95 announcement, I mean, Sony went after Sega, and they said $299, and everyone applauded and clapped. So maybe this is them doing that all over again.
Like, think about this. What if Microsoft goes, okay, Xbox 2, this is what it's going to be like. It's twice as powerful as the Xbox One X. I can't imagine that happens, but let's just say it's this really crazy powerful system, and Nintendo releases something that's literally just a small step up, maybe a higher resolution portable screen, stuff like that, right? Yeah. Maybe it does those things. The moment Sony comes out and goes, not only are we just as powerful as the Xbox One or Xbox 2, and have the same support or whatever as the Switch does, but we're doing it all at a cheaper price. If they could do that, it would be astonishing. I think it's pretty crazy to think about it in this way, but the Nintendo Switch is not a system that is actively losing value, right? You're seeing a lot of games come out, but you're not seeing the system become much cheaper because it is a portable system and it was using very expensive hardware at the time. So for it to lower in price, it's just going to take a little bit longer. Even though we see a much quicker advancement in mobile technologies, I think that you're seeing a much quicker advancement when it comes to desktop-based computers and stuff like that. And the machine parts that you're seeing in the PlayStation 4 completely get cheaper as time goes along. So I think for Sony to stay as long as they possibly can on the PlayStation 4 and make as much money as they can makes way more sense than anything else.
Yeah, I agree.
But folks, what do you think? Do you believe that this is going to be the way this plays out and Sony is just going to wait as long as they can for the PlayStation 5?
Is this a mistake? Is E3 crumbling somehow?
Yeah, let us know what you think.